You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
I see you looking at me.
Can I have your attention, please? Yes, I, Wanda Sykes here. You ever think about all the nicknames we have for breasts? Boobs, tatas, the girls, chesticles, bubbies. Heck, you might even have your own nickname for them. And yet, even though they get so much attention, they're still so ignored when it matters most. What's up with that? Well, on February 9th, tune in to see why I'm talking so much about breasts and visit yourattentionplease.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. Build your fits of the day with Abercrombie's newest denim drop. Here's where to start. Abercrombie's 90s straight jean goes with any shirt from tees to sweater polos. Super versatile. Their loose and baggy jeans are more trend forward, so you can grab those and go out with your friends. Abercrombie's denim fits come in a range of washes. Build your looks around Abercrombie denim. Shop online or in-store.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Find more great shows like this at wearelibertarians.com. Welcome to We Are Libertarians. My name is Chris Spangle. This is another edition of our special series called The Path to Libertarianism. And our goal with these is basically to talk to people that you may have heard of, prominent libertarians, talk about their development as libertarians so you can hear your story and theirs. I'm very excited today to be talking to Joe Bishop-Henchman, who is a chair for the National Libertarian Committee's. Well, you're running for chair. And Joe, I don't know why. Please tell me why. Why would you do this to yourself?
Well, there's a lot of work we've got to do. I want to see us actually be a viable third party electing people. I'm pretty impatient seeing all of the bad public policy being made all over the country and wish we had more libertarians at the legislative negotiating table. So that's what I want to see happen.
Well, great. Well, we're glad you're running, and many of the people here at We Are Libertarians are big fans, including myself, and wish you all the best. If you want to find out more about his run, you can go to winwithjoe.org. But let's start with your development, and we'll talk a little bit more about your race for chair and all that towards the end.
Sure.
We don't want to get the cart before the horse, but let's talk about little Joe Bishop-Henchman. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. What was your family like? Did you come from a political family? What political persuasions were you kind of stewing in as a kid? And when did you find an interest in this? Start with your origin story, I guess.
Sure. Well, I'm born and raised in San Diego County, California, and miss the weather and the beach every single day since I moved to Washington, D.C.
My aunt and uncle are from there, and it's beautiful there.
Oh, where in San Diego?
Poway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up Carlsbad, Oceanside Vista,
Okay.
Kind of on the other side of the hills. Family wasn't very political. I changed that actually, but I guess my real first memory of a political instinct was when I was really young. The neighbors across the street had to move, and they didn't want to move, but they had to move. And so it's this elderly African-American couple, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They, just wonderful. They always had the best Halloween candy. They always were everybody's babysitters when anybody needed one. And then they had to leave their house and move. And what was happening was they were putting a new highway through nearby, and they needed the land for an on-ramp. To kind of grade down into the on-ramp. And so they took their house and told them they had to move. And, I didn't really understand why they had to move. We had to go through them saying their sad goodbyes and moving, and it left the neighborhood worse for it. In the end, they ended up rerouting the highway. So they never actually did anything with the house that they took. So I just looked on Google Earth. It's still an empty lot to this day. And I guess at that young age, I first started realizing maybe the people in power don't really know what they're doing. So kind of a proto-libertarian instinct, I think. And
At what age were you?
I don't even remember. I was less than 10. But we were at the San Diego County Fair in '92, so I would have been 11 at that point. and Libertarian Party had a booth at the fair. Picked up some literature, and it kind of made sense to me, and even that young. And then in '96, Harry Browne and Joe Jorgensen were the national ticket, and I organized a little pamphlet handing out chapter of Youth for Brown Jorgensen '96.
Were you the one? Were you like?
We had two others, so maybe the largest chapter in the country. I don't know, but and printed up our own little pamphlets and handed them out, and then we were off and running. When I was a teenager, San Diego passed a curfew law in order to tell teenagers they had to stay inside after dark, based on this misguided, teenagers cause crimes and all that. So we organized a bunch of protests against it. An organization called Libertarian Rock. So it was kind of a combination of a whole bunch of different groups, but we did the messaging and everything, and MTV actually came out and filmed us protesting against the curfew. So that was my first media appearance. I would have been 16 at the time.
Do you remember the show? Because I bet you that my high school was featured on the same show you were featured on.
The show was called Fight for the Right. Somebody found an archival copy, but then now it's been misplaced again, and I've been trying to find it.
You're running for office. That's
all. Yeah, exactly.
Joe.
Yeah. But we haven't been able to find it, but it happened. And we actually were able to get a First Amendment carve out put into the law. So to this day in San Diego, it's still against the law if you're under a certain age to be out after 10 p.m. But if you wear a sticker that says repeal the curfew while you're out, you're exercising your First Amendment rights. You come under that exception. You're able to be out after dark.
That's amazing. That's really cool. So let's go back to Harry Browne because he's kind of a forgotten. He's been resurrected a little bit in the last month or so, just because of Jacob Hornberger and his past with Browne and Hornberger's run and treatment of Amash. But Harry Browne, I've been around the movement for about 15 years. And there's certain names that sort of it starts with those people. It starts with Harry Browne for the older people, the older Gen X or boomers. And then it goes to Ron Paul. Now it's Gary Johnson. Soon it'll be, presumably Justin Amash or a Thomas Massey. But Harry Browne's memory is kind of fading a little bit. He passed away in the early 2000s. Can you talk a little bit about Harry Browne? What attracted you to him? I know you were younger, but what are some of your memories of Mr. Browne?
Well, I mean, I don't want to overstate it. I think I only met him twice in my life. Once when he his campaign swung through San Diego in 1996, and then once in the Bay Area when I was in college. The Cal Libertarians, which I was either vice president or president of at the time, we all went over to go to his fundraiser in 2000. So those are the only times I ever met him. But his book, he wrote a lot of books, but his book, Why Government Doesn't Work, which was his 96 campaign book, came out in 95.
It's on my shelf.
Oh, yeah. It really just spoke to me. And, every libertarian's got some favorite books, and they're all kind of different ones. Objectivists really like the kind of philosophical or fictional scope of Ayn Rand, and obviously a lot of people like Mises and Rothbard. I guess I'm a charts and graphs and timelines and history kind of guy, and that's really kind of how Why Government Doesn't Work is set up. It's kind of a classic public policy brief of outlining the problem, explaining why the problem is the problem, and then laying out solutions. And he does that for, I think it's 10 or 12 different issues, and those are the chapters of the book. And it was persuasive enough for me that there were a few areas at the time when I first read it where I wasn't fully on board, and it completely turned me around on some of those issues. And I mean, to this day, I still hand out to kind of new libertarians, I still hand out the book because it's what kind of pulled me in. So when Governor Lincoln Chafee joined the party last summer and came to Washington, D.C., I gave him a copy of Why Government Doesn't Work by Harry Browne. And I said, I really like this. I hope you really like it too. had a way to synthesize everything. And, I read something about before he died, he was working on a book about war. And what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, and it's kind of pushed to keep us engaged everywhere. And according to his widow, Harry Browne had read hundreds of books, made notes all over the place, was trying to work with the structure of it. So I mean, he just didn't like sit down at a computer and dash stuff off. I mean, everything he wrote was thoroughly sourced, thoroughly referenced, absolutely factual, and that just really spoke to me.
Yeah, he wrote several different types of books. One about investing. There's one that I have relied on a lot, along with Jeffrey Myron's book and Ron Paul's book along the same vein. Liberty A to Z, I think, is what Harry Browne's book is called. Ron Paul's was Liberty Defined. There are some of these, and the thrust of these books are basically it's a little mini explainer on that particular issue. So you flip to the Social Security section, and then he's got a bunch of talking points. And Liberty A to Z has been really helpful for me over the last decade. And what's funny about Harry Browne's Why Government Doesn't Work, because I went back and I looked at it about a year ago, just kind of looking through it. It really, you don't think about, I'm 36. I don't know if you want to share your age.
39.
So we're about the same age, but being politically interested in the 90s and being awake and aware of kind of what was going on, you go back through Harry Browne's book or the Clinton 92 campaign book, and you just see how different politics was.
Yeah.
And how those books, those campaign books, those debates, everything was so much more policy focused, lots of conversations about things like Social Security and how to reform it. And politics just seems so different now, to the point that Harry Browne's book almost doesn't connect because it's so wonky compared to what we talk about now, which is character and people. And it's almost the talk radio / reality TV-ization of politics has kind of drifted us from those policy points.
Yeah, maybe. I sometimes joke every president seems worse than the one before it, and it kind of doesn't seem possible how we can continue along that train of things. I think there's a lot of demand out there for solutions. I don't think Congress's approval rating has ever been lower than it is now. And it's never really been that high, but it seems to be going ever further downwards. And I'm in DC, so I'm based in Washington D.C., so I interact with a lot of the different players and the people engaged in this ecosystem here. And it's just miserable being a member of Congress now. You spend all your time fundraising. You have no ability to introduce anything. Leadership decides everything. So you end up with people who want the job for the perks of it, or want the job to climb to something higher. Or people who do it out of some sense of duty and they get burned out or drummed out or whatnot. And I just don't think that's sustainable. I agree with you. That's kind of what our political ecosystem is pushing towards. And somehow the Democratic and Republican primary processes are now designed to produce the worst possible candidates for both of those parties. And you see a lot of frustration about that in people in those parties. So I'm hopeful that, being able to talk about how we would go in a different direction has an open audience. And, I reread through Why Government Doesn't Work again last year, the same. And his ability to kind of prophesize what would happen is kind of startling. So like on the chapter on healthcare, at the time we were debating like prescription drugs and covering children and all of that in the 90s. But he kind of laid out the history and the trend of things in the expansion of government involvement in healthcare. And at the time, he said half of every dollar spent on healthcare is controlled by government, and that's distorting the market. And kind of here's what will happen next. And then after that, this will happen. And then after that, this will happen. And he didn't put dates to it because he wasn't trying to be Nostradamus or anything. But everything he laid out in that sequence of events has come to pass. And there's more things along the sequence of events. And the last one is basically the health enforcement agency finds a French fry in your glove compartment and fines you or arrests you for imposing excessive costs on the state for the healthcare system. So, at the time I thought that was ridiculous. They're never going to, launch some war on fatty foods or something. But, a lot of states have already started doing that kind of stuff.
Shopping is hard, right? But there's a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And she sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what I love and send back the rest. It's so easy. Personal styling for everyone. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
You found your person. Now let the Knot help you with everything else. The Knot connects you to the wedding inspo, vendors, venues, and planning tools you need to make your day totally you. Having helped plan 25 million weddings, we've got your back when it comes to every little detail like RSVPs, budgets, and more. Because your wedding comes to life with the connections that matter the most. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Yeah, including Michael Bloomberg. So how you're running to be at the top of the food chain? I know Nick Sarwark calls himself the least important libertarian leader, something along those lines.
Right.
But how does the Libertarian Party or libertarian movement at large stand out? Like, I view the future of the Libertarian Party as the voice of the small business owner, the voice of the middle class, as Republicans start to chase after the working poor and the Democrats start to chase after the uber rich in a weird confluence of events. The people in the middle, the sane people, the people who are just kind of scratching their heads, really 80% of this country going, I don't know what any of this is. I'm not interested. I'm just looking for solutions. How do we craft a path forward as a movement to really start to give normies, regular people, solutions?
Well, a lot of people now are feeling politically homeless. Registrations for independent have never been higher. A lot of people aren't voting, even though they care a lot about the system. And, you just seeing the lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden on the Democratic side and seeing the alarmism from a lot of people on the Republican side about their choice as well. I think there's a big opportunity for us. A lot of it is just kind of usual campaign tactics of figuring out our messaging. So just as an example, I ran for Attorney General in DC in 2018. That was to keep our ballot access here, which we were able to do. In coming up with the messaging for the campaign, I wanted to come up with 3 issues, and things I called 80% issues, stuff 80% of the electorate would agree with, but were not being met by the incumbent in the race or really by anyone else running for office. And in DC, those were, let's get barriers out of the way for the construction of new housing. That's the Attorney General can do. He's got a Deputy Attorney General that can intervene in those cases where somebody's trying to block construction or prevent anything. I got a bunch of stories on that. Let's get obstacles out of the way of expanding school choice. And then let's actually hold the metro system here, the leaders of it, accountable for their lack of safety and their disregard for people dying on it and all of that. Which the Attorney General here he's eager to use those powers against every private business, but is totally hands off when it comes to the metro system, which has been literally killing people. And that message resonated with people because it's not anti-libertarian. It's not end the Fed or pull the troops out, because the DC Attorney General really doesn't have anything to do with that kind of stuff. But it still carried libertarian principles forward. And And honestly, a message that really worked with a lot of people related to all of that was, wouldn't it be nice if we had a libertarian at the table raising these issues? And even dyed-in-the-wool Democrats don't want 100% control of this city, because they're worried about what would happen in that situation. They want other voices at the table, and so they were open and willing, and we got quite a few votes on it. We got more votes than Donald Trump got for president in 2016, which maybe isn't a high bar in the District of Columbia, but it's an important bar that we had to beat, and I'm glad we were able to do it. So what the Libertarian Party can do on all of this is help with this training and help with this framing and helping candidates and affiliates decide the messaging that works for their communities. Because the messaging that works for the Attorney General's race in the District of Columbia isn't going to be the messaging that works for other races in other parts of the country. But if we can start communicating that libertarians are about solutions, libertarians are about principles, libertarians are about making sure that good policy decisions are made, and that we always have freedom and liberty and individual choice at the forefront, I think we can make a lot of headway.
So one of the big changes in the movement since I've been a part of it in 2007, when I joined, it goes back to sort of that reality TV that Trump has just kind of, in a lot of ways, torn the fabric of not just the country, but also the movement and how libertarians talk to each other. Mm-hmm. Which there were always disagreements between, you've got the Mises versus Cato type nonsense, instead of everybody working together, we got to fight something that happened 40 years ago.
Right.
But there seems to be a new layer with social media of, I don't know, it's a vocal 20-30% of online people that just kind of scratch at anybody who wants to poke their head up and talk about something other than what that person wants them to talk about. Mm-hmm. And so I think the infighting discussion, which I tend to think is a little overinflated, it gets us all emotional, but it's not necessarily important, but it does distract us a lot. So how do you deal with wanting to be a solutions-based party, but then you've got a very vocal group of people who don't want that to take place? They want to drown out the conversation to move things their way. How do you plan to navigate that if you become chair? Because it seems to me to be one of the bigger problems facing us is just the tenor of social media within the movement.
The short answer is to set a good example and hope that others follow and incentivize people to follow. And I can give some examples on it. So, I moved to DC in 2004, but worked in the policy space, worked in transportation policy, worked at the DC Attorney General's office for a bit, and then in tax policy and helped build organizations, been board chairs and so forth since then. And, went to law school somewhere in that anyways. But anyways, so I've been active in the libertarian movement here in DC for quite some time and interacting with a lot of people. And there's obviously a gap. There's a lot more libertarians than Libertarian Party members. It's kind of orders of magnitude more. And so I've always been kind of the weird one that's, involved in the DC libertarian scene while also being a member of the party. There's not a lot of us. There, at least there weren't used to be a lot. There didn't used to be a lot of us. In part because I think the Libertarian Party has a reputation of kind of not succeeding, of being, the circular firing squad that doesn't want to do anything. And, I think 2016 belied that. I think 2016, a ticket was nominated to try and to try to get in front of Americans and try to offer a real choice for America on who to vote for president. And so that's when I started to get additionally involved in the National Party. And in 2018, I decided to run for the National Committee. National Committee consists of 17 members, 4 officers, 8 regional reps, and then 5 at-large members. So I ran for the at-large seat, one of the 5 at-large seats. And all sorts of people told me, why are you bothering? You're not going to get anything done. It's hopeless. It's just don't do it. But I wanted to try, and honestly, my campaign messaging in running for that race was, I want to run to be a voice for solutions. I want to be a voice for figuring out problems and solving them, hiring good staff, making sure they're empowered, setting goals, testing and trying things and reinforcing success. And I ended up coming up in second in the race out of the 5 and was elected. So even among libertarian delegates, which of course, is an even smaller subsection of Libertarian Party members, that message has a open audience, a willing audience. And so they were willing to elect me. And, we'll find out in the chair's race if they're willing to give me a promotion further and try to carry that forward into the leadership of the party. I'm pretty optimistic about it. You never say never, and the vote, nothing matters until the final vote on it. But I truly think that there is a large, maybe less active on social media majority that wants the party to help solve problems and has a shared vision of an America being set free in our lifetime, which means we've got to do a bunch of stuff now.
Yeah. So I want to ask an uncomfortable question.
Sure.
I respect Nick Sarwark, and I've known him a long time. And I think that when we look back at his chairmanship, he's been the most successful chair in my time in the party. And I think, for instance, the office is in great shape, and the party, by and large, is in good shape. But
we have a congressman.
Yeah, when there's the Libertarian congressman, I think we're on the verge. If Amash gets elected, this is my opinion, not Joe's. If Amash gets selected as the nominee, I think it will be, he announces and he's on the Sunday shows this week. That's not going to stop. It's going to continue. I think it'll be a very successful year. And I'm sure that he was instrumental in making Amash comfortable with the decisions that he's made, in terms of, here's the roadmap. Here's the support that you'd have from local and states. And here's the picture, right? My main criticism of Nick is his online behavior. I think picking the fight a couple years ago, I was very vocal about he shouldn't pick fights with people like Tom Woods, because I look at it and I go, why pick a fight with people in the libertarian media? When I started this show, there were like 2 other libertarian podcasts. And it was Libertarian Solution, a radio show down in Arizona, and I don't even remember the other and me. And now we have there's quite a few. There's a blossoming ecosphere of this, and he's fearless, but sometimes it's ill-advised to be snarkwark, as he's affectionately called.
I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah. And he and I have had our back and forth, but I do have respect for him. I think that he is well intended, and the rumors of the CIA and all that stuff is just so overblown. How do you intend to use social media? I mean, I would just say that is my big drawback, is that he made unnecessary enemies and relished a little bit in that too much. And I'm sure that's going to be a lot of our listeners who are going to be delegates. They're going to want to know, like, hey, is this going to be the end of that? Or how are you going to handle social media and move forward with promoting the party?
Yeah, no, it's certainly a fair question. I am not a pick fights on social media guy. So if I've got a personal Facebook page, and then I've got a campaign or kind of at-large member, and now a campaign Facebook page. And on both of them, I'm laying out what I see as the facts, and sometimes photos of my dog and my husband. But, so, today's May 4th when we're recording this. And so it's the 50th anniversary of the Kent State shooting. So on my personal page, I wrote up a little just summary of what happened at Kent State for people that might not be familiar with it. And, I'm not attacking anybody on it except maybe President Nixon, and just sharing, a little bit of history that's part of our legacy and something that we should never really forget. And then on my personal page, or on my campaign and at-large member page, we had a really controversial vote on the National Committee on Saturday. So I posted something of what the vote was, who voted what way, and then as the first comment, I posted why I voted the way I did. And I've done that consistently throughout my at-large term. So, I can't promise I can't promise everyone's always going to agree with everything that I would do as chair. That's impossible. But I can promise that I'm going to be as transparent as possible about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to explain about it. And if you disagree with me, I'm going to be respectful in talking about it. Because I do think we have a respect deficiency. And it's not everybody, but it's a lot of people, because there's a lot of libertarians who get burned out in the Libertarian Party, and it's partly overcommitment, and it's partly our welcoming committee is not as welcoming as it could be. And I'd like to change that. And, I can't bang a gavel and change it. I can't decree anything and change it. All I can really do is set a good example on it, and that includes social media presence. And, when I joined the National Committee, there were all sorts of factions on the National Committee. And, we were just coming off the term where we had Arvin Vohra and all that stuff. That was before me. But I joined, and so there was still a bit of a legacy of the tension from that. And honestly, it took us 6 months of talking past each other. We didn't really have a good kind of icebreaker, get to know you thing. We just kind of got thrown into it, and everybody communicates in a different way. Everybody has different priorities, or, we may all share the same goals, but we have different emphasis within them. And we kind of had to feel that out with each other. Since then, I think we've been a much more constructive National Committee. We disagree on stuff. We have close votes. We battle on things, but we're able to talk on it and leave the fights at the table. And I think that's a lot of what's required. And I've tried to be part of that. I've tried to draw out points of compromise, draw out, instead of focusing on motivations or intentions, talking about what our goals are and what outcomes would be, what concerns would be. And so I've at least tried to contribute to that. And I've gotten quite a few endorsements in this race from members of the National Committee, more than either of my opponents, and across factions. So, I'm a pragmatist, but I've got a lot of radicals supporting me, got a lot of people in other groups supporting me, in part because I think they understand that I want to be fair, and that I want to build something up, not break it down.
Yeah, and that's one of my that's one thing I've noticed is that the LNC, the little bit I've paid attention, this LNC specifically has been fairly good. I mean, I've seen some battles. I mean, the Wayne Allen Root days, for instance, or the just some of those early 2010 days were brutal. And this seems to be an LNC of people who get along, and while there are factions, they feel there's people feel heard, and they're, I don't know, like the convention being moved and dealing with the pandemic stuff is kind of the first little argument that I've seen pop up. And it doesn't seem to me to be handled in the toxic way that it was in LNC's past. So, to whomever is responsible for that, I'm sure you are part of it. The chairman's part of it. Thank you.
Team effort.
Yeah, it's a team effort, and just getting along. I think that personal level, like I look back and I think, man, at the time I thought Lee Wrights was this way, but as time goes on, you learn to go, I really respected Lee Wrights. I respect him now. I respect George Phillies. Some of these people at the time when you're in the middle of it, you don't have as much appreciation for as you should.
I mean, I got a story on that, which I tell too much now, but I haven't told you yet. So
I don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. So at our first budget meeting of the term, we were presented a deficit budget, negative 6 figures. And we already, we just come off of a deficit budget the year before. We had no money in the bank. We had $100,000 of unpaid bills. We just couldn't do a deficit budget. And at the first day of the LNC meeting, we just kind of spun our wheels and didn't really come up with any solutions. And, you know, at the time, I'm a freshman on the national committee. This is my first budget meeting. And so I kept waiting for somebody to, you know, we got a lot of reelected incumbents there, to step up and say, you know, we can't do this. Here's the solution. And just so by the end of the first day of the 2-day meeting, we hadn't gotten it. We hadn't made any progress. And I ended up hanging out with Richard Longstreth, who's the representative for Region 1, which is like the Western states. And he's radical. I'm a pragmatist. In votes up until that point, I don't think we had ever voted together on anything. We really have different conceptions of where the party should be going and kind of the end state of libertarianism and all of that. And, you know, you name the issue. I don't think we agreed on it, but we both want the budget to be balanced. And, you know, he's an accountant by trade. I'm a lawyer who's got a lot of nonprofit management experience. And we were just griping together about it. And, you know, kind of together, we both said, let's come up with an alternative. And, you know, let's just make it a real alternative, because, you know, I don't want to vote against, I remember saying, I don't want to vote against this without at least trying to put something better together. And so we stayed up very, very late into the night, going through every line item in the budget, draining all the slush funds, finding all the hidden stuff, haircutting everything, but making sure all the essential stuff kept going. And then the next morning we were going to present it. I think I honestly thought it would fail 2 to 15. They'd pass it, but hey, at least we would have tried. It took all day, but it ended up getting adopted. And that's how the LNC balanced its budget. And, you know, so I think there's a hunger for solutions, even in that context. And I mean, Richard and I, we still don't really agree on a lot of stuff, but he's my first phone call on a lot of things. And, you know, because, you know, I'm able to talk to my people and Richard's able to talk to his people. And, you know, you get the two of us together and you're often halfway home on something. And, you know, I've got to give a little and he's got to give a little on coming up with solutions, but they're better for the party. And, so, you know, that's just one example. I could give a lot more, but that's the kind of stuff that's been going on the LNC this term.
Yeah, people tend to think, you know, back when I was more involved, I was part of the cabal and people, right. You know, a libertarian elitist. I'm like, do you have any idea how easy it is to be a libertarian elitist? You just show up, and if you show up for like 2 years straight, you're in the elite club. Like it's not a big pool, which is why I think some of those arguments feel a little more sharp. I
mean, I've got a good professional career. I'm not doing this for the power. I'm not doing this for the notoriety. I got plenty of that. I'm suing the IRS. I already am in. I already have a microscope on me in a lot of ways. So, yeah. All
right. Well, let's talk about that decision. Okay. I don't know anything about that, but that sounds. What are you doing? What happened? Why are you suing the IRS?
Okay. So my day job is I battle state tax policy. So I go all over the country fighting bad tax policy. I built up a team at a nonprofit organization that I worked at for about 10 years. And by the end of my tenure there, we were knocking down about $2 billion a year in state taxes. So not bad work. And, you know, it carries over into some federal stuff. So the Institute for Justice, which is a libertarian public interest law firm here in the DC area, one of their core issues is licensing. So dumb laws that require people to get licenses for stuff that, you know, you don't really need a license for. So the IRS passed this regulation that said, if you want to prepare tax returns for money, you have to get a license from the IRS and pay this excessive fee. And, you know, it's dumb. Because I'm a lawyer, I'm actually exempt from the license. So, I mean, anybody who thinks this is about like qualifications or knowledge of the tax law, I mean, it's nonsense. It's not. It's just a money-making scheme from the IRS.
Well, not just money-making, but we've also seen in the shutdowns why business registration matters. If they don't register your business, then what else do they have to hold over your head if they want to enact shutdowns, for instance? It's about power, too.
So IJ got that struck down. That licensing thing was thrown out. So, you know, good job. They did amazing work. I helped do a expert testimony in that case, and it was great that they did that. So the IRS comes back and says, all right, we're not going to license, but we're going to still keep collecting the fee. So if you're a paid tax preparer, you still have to register and pay this annual fee. So a libertarian lawyer thought that was dumb, and so he's filed a lawsuit against the IRS on it. He got two accountants and then me. I can give a long explanation about why I'm involved, but I'm involved. And so the three of us are the class representatives for the class of everyone who's paid this fee to the IRS. So we're suing the IRS over it. We did very well in trial court. The government appealed to the DC Circuit to Merrick Garland, who ruled partly in favor of the IRS and partly in favor of us, upheld the fee, but highly suggested it is excessive and sent it back to the trial court to figure out how excessive it is. So that's kind of where we're at in it. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to end up being about $160 million refunded that the IRS doesn't want to pay back. So, I often get asked, do you think taxation is theft? It's like, I'm trying to get the money back. So, of course.
Oh, you don't want to pay your $160 million. Sorry. Sorry, we'll treat you like you treat us. You have to pay it or else. Well, that's really cool.
So I get extra special attention every tax
filing. I'm sure. Yes, I can't imagine how careful you are.
I mean, it goes with the job, goes with the territory.
But you know what? You're probably not all. And Joe Houtman has this great line where he says, libertarians fight for a life that's far more interesting than the ones they lead. And I'm sure that you're all not that interesting or controversial when it comes to sitting down and filing your taxes.
We only have one life. Let's have some fun with it.
That's right. Yeah. So let's talk about some books, or if somebody's a newer libertarian, what are some books or movies or I'm one of those people. I'll expand your screen. I was looking at your bookshelf. I see, Team of Rivals, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, The Rise of the Third Reich, The Last Lion series, all kinds of great books on that back bookshelf there.
Yeah. I got the law stuff on the other wall over there. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I prefer history, so it's a nice bookshelf that you can see on the video on our YouTube channel. What are some books in your formation? Books, movies, audiobooks, magazines. What are some intellectual influences that you could recommend to people that were very important to you in your development?
Sure. Well, we talked about why government doesn't work. That'd still be kind of in my top 10 list. I've got a lot of books on political transitions. It's something that really fascinated me when I was getting my degree in college, moving from one form of government to another, which was happening quite a lot in the 1980s and 1990s. So when I was in college in the late 90s, there were a lot of new papers and books that had just come out on it. So, Brazil moving from a military dictatorship to democracy and kind of how they did that, or Eastern Europe. Poland choosing between shock therapy versus gradualism and what were the pros and cons of those approaches. So that kind of stuff really fascinates me. I think it's relevant because in a way, libertarians are advocating for transitions of one type of system to another type of system. And a lot of the kind of philosophical debates we have in libertarianism is really, how fast, how slow, how do we do that transition? So I found it really good of informing stuff. I've got quite a few books on healthcare policy. My mom was a nurse growing up. My dad worked at telecommunications in a hospital for 40 years. So did my uncle. I mean, I'm like the first in my family to not be in the medical industry. But, I still have a big interest in it. And it's kind of this overarching giant problem that nobody really has offered good solutions for. I mean, the Republicans came in 2016. Basically, it all teed up for them to pass something on healthcare, and they were incapable of doing it because they don't really have any idea what they want to do. Democrats have ideas what they want to do, but it's just, spend a bunch of money and make everything worse. So, I do read a lot on that. I got a lot of legal books. Let's see. Let me look around. Yeah. Got some religious stuff. It's a lot of this transition stuff. I've got basically every biography of President Eisenhower. And it's really fascinating reading those because the treatment of him by historians changed dramatically over the years.
Really?
Shortly after he left office, his perception of him was that he was just this do-nothing president that played golf all the time and didn't really do anything. And since his papers have come out and since other biographies have come out, it shows how untrue that really was. I mean, he used to be a general. He was the Supreme Allied Commander. I mean, he wasn't sitting around doing nothing. He was very much working every day to make things happen, but he understood how you got things done, which is by working through other people, by creating incentives, by creating the structures for people to succeed. The Eisenhower grid comes from him, which is this management technique where you sort out what's urgent and important from each other to help you decide what to focus on and what you need to schedule and what you need to delegate and everything. I mean, frankly, he was teed up with so many opportunities to send in American troops that he passed on. I mean, he did a few times, but for the most part, he passed on it, or he did it as this superficial gesture just to say that he did it, and then he pulled the troops out very quickly. So like in Lebanon, he sent in troops in 1958 in Lebanon to basically sit on the beach for a month or two, and then he pulled them out. But it was just basically a big gesture. But that was in opposition to the military brass, which wanted a much more full-scale involvement. And, the same thing happened in Vietnam, where he resisted pressure to go bail out the French and send in American troops. And he diffused a lot of international crises during his tenure, lessons, unfortunately, that President Kennedy didn't really learn until it was too late, and, causing the Berlin standoff and the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth. In Vietnam. And so, it's just kind of been fascinating reading kind of how he operated and what he did. Politically, I don't know, how much I agree with President Eisenhower, but in terms of, he may be at least one of our best presidents in keeping us out of war and managing the job and keeping everything moving.
And obviously the farewell speech, which libertarians often quote, that not a lot of normal people talk about, the military industrial complex speech. Yeah, I mean, and just think about like what it would be like hearing that from the first time. And this guy who's, conquered, beat Hitler, and is, the number one general in the country, and he chooses his farewell speech to be, beware of generals. Don't let them lead public policy. And we mostly disregarded his advice. We still do to this day. So that's why I think it's still so timely, and the day will come where we follow his advice on that. I also have a lot of train books and a lot of Dick Tracy comic books. I got C.S. Lewis Chronicles of Narnia, which I basically know by heart. I love that series. And I've written a few boring books on tax policy in certain states, which are real page turners. An author as well. Very good. Yeah, it is interesting to study history through the lens of like a single person, and that's why I love biographies, because you do, especially biographies now, they take, the Chernows, the Ambroses, the McCulloughs, they try to include social history as much as they do just the biography of the person. So you get a better understanding of kind of politics at the time. Robert Caro's, my president that I've really enjoyed reading about was LBJ, and Robert Caro's series on him, which, what an awful human being. You don't walk away with the same respect for him that you do with Eisenhower if you read those books. But studying history through the lens of a single person, Taylor Branch's MLK biographies and the study of the civil rights movement, it just gives you such a better appreciation. And then if you attack it from multiple authors, H.L. Mencken's one of my favorite people to ever live, and I've read several biographies on him, and you just get a different shade of a person based on what that person chooses to cover, which I always find to be fascinating, like what catches the attention of the biographer about that person too.
So I have an LBJ story for you, which I know you haven't heard yet. Alan Boyd, who was LBJ's transportation secretary, is still alive. He's really old, but he's still alive, and he just wrote a biography, and includes some of stories with LBJ, which, as far as I know, have never been talked about before. And one of them is Mrs. Johnson really cared about highway beautification. It was a big priority of hers. And so LBJ called up Alan Boyd and said, I want highway beautification put in the next transportation bill. And Boyd was like, well, I'll try, sir, but the appropriating senators don't give a crap about that issue. But I'll give it a shot. And so President Johnson said, well, why don't you, when you talk to Senator so-and-so, and I don't have the book in front of me, I can give actual names. They're in the book.
Be good.
When you talk to Senator so-and-so, be sure to mention this. And Boyd doesn't reveal what he was told, but it's some kind of code phrase or something.
Right.
So Boyd goes over to the senator and says, Mrs. Johnson and President Johnson really want highway beautification in the next bill. And the senator's like, I just don't see that as a priority. It's like, well, the president wanted me to mention blank. And he said the color drained from the senator's face, and then he just walked out of the room. And then in Boyd's telling, he's in the gallery when the Senate's debating it, the bill, and the senator comes out and he says, I need to amend the bill to add language on highway beautification. And does anyone object? And no one objected. And he put it in, and he said the senator looked up at Boyd in the gallery with pure hatred on his face. And he said the senator never talked to him again for the rest of his life.
I don't blame him.
And then the next scene is the signing ceremony for the highway beautification bill. So that's how we got highway beautification. Just another LBJ story there. Yeah, really a truly terrible human being, not just in the policies, Vietnam and the expansion of government, but also just an awful human being to everyone around him, including his own family.
And it's just a great study in just following orders. I mean, you watch One Child Nation on, I think it's Amazon Prime, or you read about the development of Nazi Germany, or you read about LBJ and his cabinet. It's like people absolve themselves of participating in that. I mean, that's a very small little evil. That's just, that guy wasn't killing anybody, but there's a reason that man now hates him. And yeah. Boyd is absolved himself of it just because he, LBJ told him what to do. And it's fascinating what people will just kind of walk away from.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you, a few minutes just to pitch yourself and shameless self-promotion time. So if people are going to the convention, if they're one of the 1,000 and some delegates that are going to participate at this point, online or in person, who knows, why should, let me phrase it this way.
Okay.
I've been very critical of the Libertarian Party. I worked for the Libertarian Party of Indiana for 4 years full time. I devoted a lot of time and money and effort to it. And over the last 2 to 3 years, I've become fairly disillusioned with the party, the emotional strength that it takes to stay in the party sometimes, combined with the returns that I see, as I go around and talk to local establishment figures. Most of them kind of don't have an awareness of who I am. They don't have an awareness of what the party does or how it operates. Why should I come back to the Libertarian Party, or why should somebody be involved in the Libertarian Party, and why are you the best guy to make that happen?
All right. I love that question. There's a lot of organizations in the libertarian movement, and a lot of people and a lot of entities doing a lot of great work. And I've worked with a lot of them, educational organizations, student outreach organizations, professional organizations, on the ground activist organizations. There's only one organization focused on electing libertarians to public office, and that's the Libertarian Party. So it's kind of incomplete if you're a libertarian supportive of all of those efforts, but not the one that gets the libertarian at the legislative negotiating table. And, I don't begrudge anybody for not being involved to date. Most libertarians aren't involved in the Libertarian Party to date because we haven't proven concept of success. We're 49 years old, but seemingly still in startup mode. And we got to change that. So let me talk about some of the things that I want to see, and some of which we're already working on to change that. One of them is Libertarian Frontier Project. Out in the Mountain West, one of our contractors did a lot of deep research, kind of on his own time, to figure out districts where we've got a fat and happy incumbent who, from usually a Republican, who, is disconnected from their district. It's a small population district, and wouldn't require a lot of media, wouldn't require a lot of money to kind of dominate and run a competitive campaign. So we identified a bunch of those districts. We found good libertarians who are active in their communities, successful, know a lot of people, and we're running them for those legislative seats. And so the precise number changes every bit, but we've got somewhere between 10 and 20 of them that we're running. And these will be competitive races. So each of these candidates is responsible for their own campaign operation and raising the money for it. The National Party is putting in infrastructure help, phone banking help from all over the country, door knocking help from all over the country, messaging, strategic help, training. So in this year's budget, we worked to find $100,000 to get into the budget for it. And then I hit the phones with some other people and found another $100,000 to supplement it. And then plus what the money is on the ground. So this is not a shoestring effort. Maybe by national campaign standards, it's a shoestring effort. But as far as focusing efforts on a couple of winnable races, it's really important. I don't know how successful we're going to be with it. I think we're going to elect some people in November. And even of the ones we don't elect, we're going to get a lot of valuable lessons that we can apply next time. So for instance, last time in 2018, we almost elected Bethany Baldus as a state representative in Wyoming. And she was kind of a type of this new approach of a lot more on the ground, using data, door knocking, messaging focused effort. And she actually won on election day, but she lost with absentees. And what we realized too late is that half of Wyoming leaves Wyoming at the end of summer. So if you start door knocking after that, you miss those voters. So we're fixing that this time. And, we're having to recreate things on the fly right now because of coronavirus, but we've learned that lesson and we're applying the lessons from it. So, we're going to elect some people. We got a congressman now. I hope, whoever our presidential nominee is does well. I have to stay neutral in it until we pick him because I got to work with whoever the nominee is. But I think we're on an upswing right now, and we're going to be able to shed this, ineffective loser image that I think we've unfairly earned in the Libertarian Party. And I hope when we're able to do that, success breeds success. And, people want to invest in something that's winning. People want to invest in something that's succeeding. And, you don't really need to go much further than Jeff Hewitt, who's a libertarian supervisor on a county board in California, one of 5. And so it's 3 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and Jeff.
Right.
And he gets along well with the Democrat. Libertarians are really good at building bridges with the other parties. We understand the left in a way the right never will, and we understand the right in a way the left never will. So we're kind of natural coalition builders. And when Jeff can get on board with the Democrat, they just need one more, and whatever they do is law. And we can have that kind of dynamic all over the place if we play our cards right. It's going to be a long time before I think we can elect a majority of the Senate or a majority of Congress, or, I never say never in politics. I feel like I've lived a lifetime in politics in the last 10 years, but I think we're on the verge of being able to change a lot of things. And, anybody who finds this appealing, anybody who wants libertarians at the policymaking table, anybody who wants to celebrate libertarian victories on election night, we need you now, because we need reinforcements of people who share that vision and who want to make it happen. And I think we're making a lot of progress on it. And we'll see how the rest of 2020 goes, but that's what I'm committed to. That's why I'm involved. I don't have any free time. This is a nights and weekends thing for me, really. I've got a very time-consuming and stressful job, but I'm able to make all of this work because it's important for me. I don't want, whenever my life ends, for the country to be in the same situation than it is now, or worse. And if it is, it's not going to. I don't want it to be for lack of trying.
How stressful does somebody's job have to be for LP chair to be a vacation? I do.
I'm a lawyer's lawyer, so
Oh gosh,
I'm who lawyers call when they have a crisis that they cannot figure out. So every time my phone rings, it's crisis management.
yeah, I think it was so frustrating 10 years ago as Campaign for Liberty was in full swing and the Ron Paul campaigns were kind of, transitioning. And the Amash experiment of we're going to change it from the inside, really, it kind of shows that's just not how it's going to work. He was elected as a Republican, but it's hard to change it from the inside because you never know what factors are going to come along. And the seduction, I think he's going to have a problem answering for some of the Massey, Amash, and Rand, which is why it's so funny to hear Amash isn't principled, because those guys were kind of the heirs to the Ron Paul movement. And you see in their three cases, the compromises that had to be made. And that's part of being in politics, is just, if you're going to be in politics, you're going to make compromises, because just like you were talking about earlier, you've got to have, I've got to call Longstreth and we've got to negotiate these things. And, it's just how it is. But it really does seem, with having a Libertarian congressman and having Amash come over and having, just the candidates that we're going to run against, it does seem like the Libertarian Party is heading in a positive direction. So I wish you all the best.
Oh, and I want to earn back your membership and all of your listeners too, not by just, coming on and begging you, but by making a party that you will be proud to be a member of.
Can I borrow $25? I'm just kidding. And in full disclosure, and thank you to Ethan Bishop-Henchman, who is a patron of We Are Libertarians. So thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the great Ethan.
Yeah, it's my husband, if anybody's confused. So.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Again, it is winwithjoe.org if you want to learn more about all the stuff that Joe is up to. Joe, thank you so much for your time.
Anytime, Chris.
Thank you to everybody listening to We Are Libertarians, and we will talk to you again next time.